Sarah, James, and Lily were three college friends, bonded by a shared thrill-seeking spirit. They'd been through haunted houses, eerie forests, and urban legends. But nothing had prepared them for the abandoned hospital on the edge of town. Whispered to be cursed, a place where ghosts roamed and mysterious disappearances happened, it was said to have closed in the 1950s after a series of horrific events. One evening, during a thunderstorm, James dared the group to spend a night inside the hospital. "Come on, just a night. We can bring flashlights, some food, and sleep in one of the old wards." "How bad can it be?" he challenged. Sarah hesitated. "People say there's a reason it's still locked up." "Why do you think the owners didn't sell it off or tear it down?" Lily scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Sarah, you don't really believe those ghost stories, do you?" With that, they agreed. That weekend, they packed supplies and made their way to the decrepit building, which loomed in the fog like a sinister sentinel from a bygone era. The front door, surprisingly unlocked, creaked as they stepped inside. The scent of mildew, decay, and something unidentifiable, maybe rot, filled the air. Flicking on their flashlights, they saw peeling wallpaper, broken tiles, and long, dark hallways stretching in every direction. They decided to explore the lower floors first, weaving through empty rooms filled with rusty hospital beds, broken wheelchairs, and medical equipment scattered as if the place had been abandoned in haste. On the walls, old newspaper clippings spoke of patients who went mad, doctors who had unexplained accidents, and staff who had quit without warning. Sarah's flashlight illuminated a large, dark stain on the floor of one room. "Do you think it could be blood?" "It's probably just rust from an old pipe," James said with forced confidence. They moved on, but all felt a growing unease, as though something was watching them from the darkened hallways. "Let's check the basement," James suggested, but even he seemed less enthusiastic about the idea. Legends said the basement held an illegal operating room where forbidden experiments had taken place. It was an urban legend, they reassured themselves. The stairwell down was narrow, and their steps echoed ominously. The lower they descended, the colder and heavier the air became, as if they were passing into another world. Reaching the basement level, they saw something strange, flickering lights, almost like candles, illuminating a shadowy corridor. They followed the faint glow and found an operating room, intact despite the years of abandonment. Instruments covered in a strange dark residue were strewn across the table, and on the walls, faded symbols seemed drawn in blood. Lily felt her pulse quicken as she noticed a chair in the corner, its leather straps still stained dark brown. This is all wrong. "We should go," she whispered. Before anyone could respond, a scraping sound echoed from down the corridor. They turned, and their flashlights caught the briefest glimpse of a figure, its form hunched, face obscured, eyes glowing with a pale, lifeless light. "Run!" Sarah screamed, and they bolted back up the stairs, hearts pounding, the thing's footsteps echoing behind them. Once upstairs, they reached for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. It felt as if something held it shut from the outside. "We're trapped," James said, panic in his voice. "There has to be another way out," Sarah replied, her voice shaky. They decided to head toward the third floor, where the nurses' quarters and offices might have had another exit. On the second floor, they saw rooms labeled with names like patient holding, isolation, and treatment ward. The rooms were empty, but the smell of antiseptic hung in the air, as if the nurses had just cleaned up. The corridor stretched into darkness, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Occasionally, they'd hear faint whispers, snippets of words they couldn't quite make out. They stumbled upon a room filled with crumbling paper records. James picked up a file labeled Patient 312, Special Case. The file described the patient as a young girl who had become violent and claimed to hear voices from the shadow people. Her drawings, childlike yet disturbing, showed dark figures with elongated limbs standing over her bed. "That's enough of this," Sarah whispered, backing away. But just then, they heard a child's laughter echo down the hallway, chilling and innocent. The sound of tiny footsteps followed, coming closer and closer. "Don't look back," Lily urged, pulling them forward. They darted down the corridor, but the child's laughter continued, growing louder until they couldn't take it anymore. They stopped and turned, only to see a small figure, a young girl with hollow eyes and a twisted smile, standing motionless. When Sarah blinked, the child had disappeared, leaving only the faintest trace of cold in the air. Desperate to find an exit, they decided to retrace their steps back to the basement, hoping that facing their fears might provide a way out. Upon reaching the operating room, they saw an old journal lying on the table. Its leather cover was cracked and worn, yet the pages were filled with descriptions of bizarre experiments. Names, dates, and lists of patients who had disappeared during surgeries. One entry read, "The procedure was successful. We have trapped them in the in-between." Before they could process what it meant, the room grew colder, and shadows began creeping along the walls, taking on vaguely human shapes. They moved closer, stretching out long fingers toward the trio. The journal dropped from James' hands as they tried to move, but it was as if the air had turned thick, holding them in place. In one final act of terror, Sarah screamed, and the shadows seemed to react, merging together to form a towering figure with empty, haunting eyes. Suddenly, Lily noticed a small ventilation duct near the corner of the room. She motioned frantically for the others, and together they broke free from the invisible grip, racing toward it. James kicked open the cover, and they scrambled inside, crawling as fast as they could through the narrow, suffocating space. As they moved, they heard the laughter, footsteps, and whispers behind them, as if the spirits were chasing them. The air grew colder, and Sarah felt something icy grip her ankle, pulling her back. She kicked wildly, freeing herself, but the sounds grew louder. Afterward, they never spoke about that night again. The abandoned hospital remained untouched, and though they had escaped, each of them felt haunted. Sarah would wake up at night, hearing faint laughter. James would see shadows out of the corner of his eye. And Lily, despite moving far away, could still feel the cold, lingering grip around her ankle.